You do the top 64 picks, and you're going through the mock drafts exercise, and next thing you know, there's no running backs down.
Right. Guys, let's talk about the running back position in this year's class, because obviously we haven't had a lot of the top end talent that we've seen over the course of the last couple of years as far as prospects go. But you can see on the board, it's very congested at the end of day 2 and the beginning of day 3, and that's usually what you hear this sweet spot is for running backs in this class. But I think this is an even more extreme example of that this year. So, Damien, I know you're a big RB guy. When you look at the talent distribution and how we value the prospects at the running back position in this year's class, like, how do you think teams should approach needing a running back, and when that's an appropriate time to start considering drafting one of these guys?
Man, Kyle, for me right now, looking at that type of question, it all depends on where you are roster-wise, right? And my biggest thing with teams, if you're going to draft a running back, don't be a bad team and draft one. Like, it's just not a good building block to build upon. So you look at a team like the Buffalo Bills, who is a perennial, not just playoff, but almost Super Bowl contender type of team. They could draft one on day 2 or day 3, whether it's a Kenneth Walker or Breece Hall or Rachaad White, one of those guys, and I'll be comfortable with a team like that pulling that off. The talent, in particular in this class, I would say it's a good depth, but it's not a lot of like legit lead guys in this group. You have, like I just listed, 3 guys that I believe could be kind of lead backs, but then you have a lot of specialists. You got between the tackle pounders on first and second down, like a Tyler Algier, then you have the Tyler Baileys and Ty Chandlers, guys who can give you a lot on the passing downs and be more of that complementary piece to a lead back for an offense.
Yeah, no, I agree. As I dive into this running back class, it like Damien said, it's more about your roster, but also, the NFL, they do running back by committee now, right? So I think you have to look at what running backs you have on your roster already, and they have running backs to kind of fill those holes, right? Like, if you have those pass catchers, but you need somebody to really dominate in between the tackles, you can go get you a running back. Or if you have those guys that dominate in between the tackles and you need you a pass catcher, you can go get that. So I think it's complementary pieces, but there is, like Damien said, good depth there. And one of my guys that I'm starting to really like when I continue to dive into him is Zamir White. Like, you really see that this guy is a premier athlete, right? You're talking about a former 5-star recruit at Georgia. They do running back by committee, so he'll be more than comfortable with doing it. But when this guy gets the handoff, he's extremely patient with the ball in his hands. Georgia runs multiple different schemes as far as inside zone, outside zone, power, and this guy's comfortable doing it all. So I think the more that talent evaluators dive into the tape, it's more about, pick your flavor and pick what you need for your roster.
So I guess the big question is, like, when does, and I know I mentioned this to you already, but you guys think about what is 90% of what Isaiah Spiller can bring you, or what's 90% of what Breece Hall can bring you, when you know that options might be there around later for you. Like, do you guys have any, like, specific teams that you feel like might have a guy? I think about what you're talking about, complementary skill sets, right? Running back by committee. Think about what Green Bay did with A.J. Dillon when they already had Aaron Jones, and they drafted him at the end of the second round, right? So, like, I think players and fits like that is kind of where I can see and envision this class going, just because there's no slam dunk, like, lock for the top 32 picks. But it's really hard to get a grasp, in my mind, on this running back class, because we don't really know who's going to make the first shoe drop.
You're right. Yeah, and that's going to be the biggest thing. Is like you said, who is going to be the first team to say, we're going to go ahead and select a running back, whether it's round 2 or 3. And it's so hard to predict. Even looking at the roster, like I said, we talked about it kind of off air. I think Buffalo could be that team, but at the same time, you have Josh Allen, you have Devin Singletary. They're not a team that has ran the ball predominantly either. So it's like, it's tough to project that they'll go running back, especially early, whether it's, early day 2, possible day 3. The team that I kind of looked at that I think should go running back, on day 2, I think the Saints, because you got Mark Ingram that's there. Alvin Kamara's got into some issues in trouble. And they've kind of ran him kind of ragged these past couple years. He's starting to get banged up. let's go ahead and get a fresh body in there. You know what I mean? Whether it is a Isaiah Spiller or a Kenneth Walker, let's get another body in there that's dynamic, that's physical, that can give you kind of best of both worlds, because Alvin Kamara is dynamic with the football in his hands. Mark Ingram is powerful with the football in his hands. If you want to go Kenneth Walker, you're going to get the best of both worlds in terms of dynamicism and power.
It's funny, Kyle, because I think when I first got here, one of the things I talked about is we've been doing mock drafts really since the fall, right? And one of the things I notice doing second round mock drafts now is there's no real home for some of these running backs. And you'll see on the board, we have 3 running backs, firmly in that kind of day 2 range, some of the high second round guys like an Isaiah Spiller or a Kenneth Walker. And then you do the top 64 picks, and you're going through the mock drafts exercise, and next thing you know, there's no running backs drafted.
Right.
And I do think teams are going to value a Spiller, a Walker, or even a Breece Hall high enough on their board. It's just a matter of in comparison to the other positions that might be perceived as more valuable or might be higher on their board. How do they stack?
Right.
But when I do think of some teams in the second round that I could definitely see pull a trigger on the back. I think of a team like Atlanta Falcons.
Just was
they
thinking
haven't
about
had a feature back in years.
Right.
And they're going to want to run the football.
They're going to need to run
Smith.
the football, exactly,
Yeah.
and especially with Marcus Mariota, who's best with a strong running game. I can see them. And Kyle, going back to your original question, would you rather have an Isaiah Spiller in the second, or a 70% type of Isaiah Spiller in the fourth? Well, for a team like Atlanta, who you need a kind of bell cow back, I'd rather spend that high-end draft capital on a potential 3-down back like Spiller, rather than a guy, maybe like trying to think who's a bigger back, like Isaiah Pacheco in the 6th round. He's good on the first and second down, but he's lacking in the passing game.
Correct.
I would value having that 3-down versatility in a Spiller from a team like the Falcons or the Texans, or really a team that can actually use a running back.
And the Falcons brought back Cordell Patterson, right? So he's kind of a jack of all trades for them as well. So that is a great point if they wanted to go Isaiah Spiller or Kenneth Walker, because I think if I remember correctly, Arthur Smith does runs that kind of outside zone type of run scheme. If he wants to get his guy that fits that scheme, you already have a complementary piece per se with Patterson.
What's tough about those conversations for me, because I agree with the teams that you mentioned, they're like, these are logical running back destination spots, Houston and Atlanta. But from an economic standpoint, are you going to use and burn those valuable years of that running back contract
on a bad team?
So that's for me, I get to that point in my mock drafts, and it's I almost feel like I need to be looking at teams picking in the back half of the round, because they're the ones that you feel like realistically can contend and would want the high production to relative low cost at that position.
I just feel like over the past 2 years, we've been in such a running back surplus, where a lot of those teams that for years have needed a running back have started investing draft capital into the position. You think about the Steelers, they got Najee. The Jacksonville Jaguars got Travis Etienne. The Broncos with Javonte Williams. The Jets are a team I think could still use a running back.
Yeah.
Michael Carter looked pretty good as a rookie, right? And so just the amount of teams that you can confidently say, hey, they need a bell cow back, it's not the same amount as it was, maybe 3 years ago. There's been a lot of good young running backs to enter this league, and so I think just naturally it's going to push this year's class, which I think we can all say is pretty good. Maybe there's no top tier guy, but overall it's a pretty good class. I think we're going to see them get pushed down just because there has been such a good kind of influx of young talent in recent drafts.
Well, I think you've seen a lot of the teams that we perceive as have their lead guy. They still have a nice contingency plan in place. Tony Pollard's there for Ezekiel Elliott. Kenyon Drake's there for Josh Jacobs. Alexander Madison's there for Dalvin Cook. And so while I think we can get a little bit hung up on, okay, who needs a lead back, who can be a lead back, and you kind of marry those things up, the NFL has shown us that they do prioritize having that secondary option. Even like Kyle said, they had Aaron Jones in place. They paid Aaron Jones. They still had A.J. Dillon as a second-round guy. So I do think that we for as much as we often, and especially me, talks about the devaluation of the running back position, the NFL is continuing to tell us that they're willing to pay their starting running backs, and they're willing to make sure that they have that number 2 guy because, like Keith said, it's a running back by committee. And, while that continues to kind of reduce the value, the teams are still prioritizing having that kind of that security blanket, that guy that can also contribute and take some of that workload away and still be a factor for, 8, 10, 12 touches a game.
I think it'll be interesting because this year we started to see the emergence of the storyline of balance, right? This is probably the first time in years where, we kind of criticized the Chiefs for not running the football. Then you talk about Sean McVay and the Rams. They were able to run the football. That was the big in the game against the Cardinals. So I think I'm interested to see how, they approach that from that standpoint.
Who's, I think, a sneaky team? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I know the Cardinals brought back James Conner.
Yep.
But Chase Edmonds is out the door. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a sneaky team on day 2 with their identity being so rooted in the offensive side of the football and what Chase Edmonds could do in the passing game. And I know James Conner can catch the football, right? But you talk about complementary skill sets. Chase Edmonds was a very different style of runner than what James Conner is, and he's been a productive player over the last few years. I think he has 1,700, 1,800 yards from scrimmage over the last 2 seasons combined. So it's not like he had a small workload. He caught like 50 balls last year. Yeah. So, I think about Arizona and those teams kind of, from my perspective, teams in the back half of each round that are perceived to be contenders, and Arizona needing to make sure as they continue to try and get clarity on what Kyler Murray is, and they want to utilize his speed as a runner, having as many different mismatch type options for a week-by-week basis. They're a team that I'd be really interested to see if they end up considering drafting a running back in this deep pool here on the second day.
I think it goes without saying that they were surprised at the contributions that James Conner gave them this past year. He performed surprisingly well in the run game and the passing game for him. Brought an attitude of toughness to their team. So I think that James was certainly a surprise for them, and I think that the ability to run the football still sends shockwaves throughout an entire team, right? It still has a tremendous effect on your defense. It still has a tremendous effect on the entire team if you can run the ball effectively. And I don't think that Cliff Kingsbury has figured out how to have a balanced offense and have his air raid translate successfully to the National Football League and have sustained success. And I think he can do so by having and figuring out ways to have more of a balanced attack and being able to run the football on effect to downs and so forth. So I think that's something he's still figuring out.
Speaking of running backs, the guy that comes to mind that I think will fit good with the Arizona Cardinals would be Rachaad White, because I think he showed to be pretty good out of the backfield. And I think when you think about height, weight, size, and him compared to James Conner, I think that'll be a good mentor for him, because like I said, I like Rachaad White out of the backfield. Not saying that he was dynamic, but he catched everything that came his way.
He had a little second gear to him.
Yeah, he had a second gear to him, and I think his running style could be very similar to James Conner. I think is a really good fit. And then with James Conner getting up in age, he's shown he's still productive, but you kind of still want to be able to save him for the back end of the season and those money times when you get into those playoff games. So I think that addition, like you said, the back end of the second round or the third round, getting a guy like that seems as though he fits that scheme, would be a really good fit for the Cardinals.
I love that. The question I wanted to point to you guys, another team that came to mind, Tampa Bay. Now, I know they just signed Leonard Fournette, but Ronald Jones just walked. Keyshawn Vaughn has not produced it the way that they thought when they drafted him, third round about 2 years ago. So that's another potential landing spot, especially if Brady is going to give him more than just another year. You add a dynamic piece behind Leonard Fournette, because he's helped them not just in the run game, but he's been a reliable pass catcher for them as well. Something that he didn't really showcase a lot coming into this year. He's evolved playing with Brady, but you find somebody, whether it's like a Tyler Beatty, that Ty Chandler, a guy like that that you can motion, you can put them in the backfield together, motion one of those guys in the slot, and create those advantageous opportunities. And a guy like Brady loves situations like that. Yeah. Remember, he had James White, Kevin Falk, Danny Woodhead, all those different kind of chess piece type of backs.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. And obviously Fournette, he was interested, and he went up, took the visit to England, came back down and signed. But even if Tom Brady only gives you one more year, you're going to have a new quarterback. Having an infrastructure in place where you're going to be able to lean on the running game because you have that backfield set is a great call. I think about the Shanahan style offenses too. These offenses are running 3 deep. I mean, think about what the Rams did. They drafted Darrell Henderson the following year, drafted Cam Akers in the second round.
Look at the 49ers. They took
Trey Sermon, third round.
Eli Mitchell,
and Mitchell ended up being the dude.
The better player.
Yeah. So, I think about those teams and where they do have picks. You're looking at that third round, fourth round, right in that sweet spot where you can see the congestion on the board behind us at the running back position. Those kinds of offenses, I think, make a ton of sense.
What about your Dolphins having that extension from Shanahan with Mike McDaniels? He brought in a guy he knows, Raheem Mostert. Brought in Chase Edmonds. Myles Gaskins is still there, but Raheem Mostert's only a 1-year deal. Chase is only a 2-year deal.
Yeah.
So if, like we talked about, these running backs could get pushed to the third round potentially, and if you think about a Kenneth Walker or a Breece Hall or Isaiah Spiller is there for him, I wouldn't be shocked to see him pull the trigger and go in and grab one of those guys with that pick that you guys have.
The one thing they don't really have is that Eli Mitchell, Trey Sermon type back for if they want to run inside zone concepts, right? So I mean, you don't know how much you can really rely on Raheem Mostert with the injuries the last couple seasons, and it's a 1-year deal anyway, so you're not locked in there. Chase Edmonds was 2 for 12, so they gave him a reasonable amount of money. And I certainly wouldn't bank on anything significant from any of the backs that were in the group last year. It just was not a good group at all. So the Dolphins and their aggressiveness this offseason, they've been very assertive with their picks to go get Tyreek Hill or go sign Teron Armstead, and they've been aggressive. So if they feel as though there's a back, their first pick's at 102. I think if you want a guy, you might be able to go up out of 102. They have a bunch of extra draft capital in 2023 because of some of the trades that they made as well. So that's certainly a spot I wouldn't dismiss. But they did bring back Savon Ahmed, who was a UDFA from Washington, who came from San Francisco when he was on the waiver wire. And he's got a little bit of juice to him, and I think he's a better fit for the style of offense that they're running now. But I wouldn't rule it out. But it's like that was a team that you could have looked at 50 and say, yeah, that makes sense. And then they traded 50, and now they're at 102. So they'd probably have to come up if they're going to help be that catalyst that pushes this running back run to start.
We talk about the surplus of running back talent and the value of the position, but just off the top of my head, there's a lot of different teams in my mind right now thinking about last year that struggled to really get production out of running backs, and also just the amount of injuries that they had. When you look at what happened with the Ravens, the Saints, even Miami, there's teams last year that want to run the football. Tennessee, I mean, how many different guys ran the football for them? And they have Derrick Henry, right? And he obviously had that injury. And I think that running back depth across the league tends to get stressed, and as you see more and more teams kind of get stuck in searching for options and just not getting the production that they want to out of the position, I think you're going to see teams really value what they can get in the middle rounds and like have guys that are going to be tied to you for 4 years on that rookie deal that, instead of continuing to churn out 1-2 year deals, sign a veteran, you kind of get some level of stability at that rookie deal to really make sure you have options that you like, but also don't really come at a high price tag. And so I think we could see a lot of activity, mid to late day 2 into the early portions of day 3 for teams to kind of build out those running back stables to make sure that they have enough for the inevitable wear and tear that these guys go through every single year.
Great point.
The perfect name that you mentioned was Tony Pollard earlier, right? Think about the value of Tony Pollard to the Cowboys. Like, they'd probably get rid of that Zeke contract in a minute if they could, right? But they can't. So what's really interesting to me is, when Zeke comes and goes this upcoming year, and then you're in a little bit better position to strip the contract down, are you going to pay Tony Pollard? Or are you going to go through the same process that they did in acquiring Tony Pollard in the first place? So, there's so many different philosophical questions for each of the 32 teams that you could apply to that makes projecting this group so chaotic.
Absolutely.